This presentation is on Medusa, representation and myth. My name is Carrie Ann Baade. As well as being the very symbol of ambiguity, Medusa's head is also one of the most archaic mythical figures, perhaps an echo of the demon Humbaba, who was decapitated by Gilgamesh. Everything implies that there is a representation of the most meaningful aspect of the sacred, insofar as it is a role of literature to assume responsibility for the sacred. Each era, when confronted with the mystery of the origins, has re-examined Medusa's head with its mesmerizing stare as something which conceals the secret of the sacred. Myths inform our identity. Mythos is derived by the Greek word mythos and sound, or mu, which is literally to make a sound with the mouth. Originally, mythos really meant style and the arrangement of words into a story form. For Plato, a myth was a metaphorical tale used to explain realities beyond the power of simple logic, such as the famous myth of the cave. Mythology, or mythologia, is a combination of mythos and logos. Logos being the informing principle of the universe, labeled, for instance, as the Word in the Christian creation story, as in the beginning, there was the Word. To study mythology is to study mythologic in general, or the defining myths of cultures in particular, and finally, the culture and collective inner life of the human quest for self-identity. That quest stretches back to the Paleolithic cave paintings to make a metaphor, to tell a story, a drive that continues to characterize the human species, as opposed to all others, to this day. Myths require cultural trapping to become form, just as dreams make use of individuals' environment and particular experience to be realized. Campbell and Jung see universal elements in myths that are embedded in the human psyche as a whole, what Jung called our collective unconscious. By comparing myths from various cultures, they see the emergence of archetypes, the universal symbols that transcend cultures. It may be helpful to see Medusa as a kind of shared dream that is interpreted differently by each of the dreamers. It would seem that the fear experienced at the sight of Medusa's head is the terror of discovering the secret behind the representation of the image. The monster who became the beautiful maiden, who then, through myth, became the monster again, finds herself repeatedly transformed throughout her history, and with each new incarnation, meanings are both lost and gained. Thus, looking at her, Sisu calls for straight on is now an impossibility, for Medusa has simply become a mirror for subsequent interpreters, and we have become either her slayer or the dread Gorgon herself. Medusa, a guardian or protectress, was a monster or a Gorgon, generally described as having one of the most hideous faces, with living snakes for hair. Gazing directly upon her would turn onlookers to stone. Most sources describe her as the daughter of Phorcys and Ceto, her chthonic parents. Chthonic is a word that means in, under, or beneath the earth. Pertaining to the earth, earthy, subterranean, apart from its literal translation, meaning subterranean, its historical or interpretive definition designates or pertains to deities or spirits of the underworld, especially in relation to Greek religion. The Greek word kathon is one of several for earth. It typically refers to the interior of the soil rather than the living surface of the land as Gaia, or the land as territory, which is Kora. It evokes at once abundance and the grave. In Greek mythology, Gorgon is a female creature. The name derives from the ancient Greek gorgos, which means dreadful. While descriptions of gorgons vary across Greek literature and occur in the earliest examples of Greek literature, the term commonly refers to any of the three sisters who had their hair made of living venomous snakes, as well as horrifying visage that turned those who beheld her to stone. Traditionally, while two of the gorgons were immortal, Cyntho and Uriel, the sister Medusa was not immortal, and she was slain by the mythical demigod known as Perseus. Gorgons were a popular image in Greek mythology, appearing in the earliest of written records and reflected in the works of such artists as Homer. They may have dated to as early as 1194 or 1198 BC. Because of the legendary powerful gaze that could turn one to stone, images of gorgons were put upon objects and buildings for protection. An image of a gorgon holds the primary location at any pediment of the Temple of Corfu, which is the oldest stone pediment in Greece dating back 600 BC. So while these are on the left, an image of Kali and a monster from, Kali on the right, and I believe a Barong from Bali, the central figure would be an Etruscan interpretation of a gorgon. There are many similarities around the world, South America, Africa, the Far East, that all have images with commonalities, and it is thought in an archetypical way that they all share a part of this mythos of female deity, monster, something difficult to behold and very threatening. With this is the apotropaic magic, which means to ward off or to turn away. This type of magic is intended to harm evil influence. And it's a deflecting of misfortune or an averting of the evil eye. Apotropaic observances may also be practiced out of the vague superstition of tradition, or like a good luck charm or an amulet, like crossing your fingers to ward off something that shouldn't happen, or knocking on wood. But these are chthonic deities and heroes who grant safety and deflect evils. Again, this is the Gorgon's head is considered an aspect of apotropaic magic. Medusa's head was both a mirror and a mask. It is the mirror of the collective violence which leaves the devil's mark, as well as being the image of death for those who look at it. Both these themes, violence rendered sacred and death by petrification. Medusa is the guardian of terrifying places, either the nocturnal border of the world of the underworld. She reappears in the role of Dante's Divine Comedy and Milton's Paradise Lost. Guarding the doorway to the world of the dead, she prevents the living from entering. So in ancient cultures, for example, I've been to Ephesus, Medusa's head would appear over doorways to houses to keep them safe from fire. She would also be on the oven door to keep the flame within the oven to, again, protect the house from evil spirits and destruction. Medusa was beheaded by the hero Perseus, who thereafter used her head as a weapon until he gave it to the goddess Athena to place on her shield and mantle. In classical antiquity, the image of the head of Medusa appeared in the evil-averting device known as the gorgonion. In ancient Greece, the gorgonion was a special apotropaic amulet showing the Gorgon's head, used most famously by the Olympian deities, both Athena and Zeus. Both are said to have worn the Gorgonian as a protective pendant. Gorgonia represents certain aspects of the mother goddess cult associated with dynamic life energy and asserts that the images may be related to a cultural continuity persisting since Neolithic times. Before I leave this slide, so another of Medusa's extended myths and powers, her head becomes the pharmacon. The head is given to Asclepius, who is associated with the caduceus and medicine. During his time, it was not just medicinally, but the pharmacon, if you took blood from one side of Medusa's neck, it was a poison that would kill. And if you took blood from the other side, it was a medicine that would cure the dead. It would bring them back to life. According to Ovid, in the Metamorphoses, the reason for the dispute that lay in Poseidon's rape of Medusa inside of the temple of the virgin goddess Athena. The goddess is supposed to have punished Medusa by transforming her face, which therefore made Medusa an innocent victim for the second time. So the symbol of snakes are an attribute of Athena, as illustrated by the famous statue of Phidias, and indicated by certain Orphic poems which refer to her as La Serpentine. Moreover, the hypnotic stare is one of the features of the goddess with blue-green eyes, whose bird is the owl, depicted with unblinking gaze. Finally, because she has affixed Medusa's head to her shield in battle, in anger, she assumes the terrifying appearance of the monster. In the Aeneid, she expresses her wrath by making flames shoot forth from her eyes. These observations are intended to show that Athena and Medusa are the two indissociable aspects of the same sacred power. A similar claim could be made in respect to Perseus, who retains traces of his association with his monstrous double, Medusa. Using her decapitated head to turn his enemies to stone, he spread death around him. When he flies over Africa with his trophy in a bag, through some sort of negligence, he drops blood from the head that falls to earth, and these drops of blood are changed into poisonous snakes, which reduce Medusa's lethal power. In this interplay of doubles, the theme of reflection is fundamental. It explains the process of victimization to which Medusa was subjected and which falls within the province of superstition of the evil eye. The way to respond to the evil eye is either to use a third eye, the one that Perseus threw at the Graeae, or to deflect the evil spell by using a mirror. In Ovid, it was stressed the significance of the shield in which Perseus was able to see the Gorgon without being turned to stone, which was given to him by Athena. Everything indicates that the mirror was the real weapon. The fact that Medusa is a mask and that this mask hides a more human face is borne out by the way in which her portrayals developed from the pre-classical era to the Hellenistic period. There is a dual transformation, the disappearance of both facial quality and ugliness. Beneath the mask lies what could be called Medusa's tragic beauty. Many elements of the myth suggest, through its basic ambiguity, the tragic nature of Medusa. One of the most revealing of these gifts from Athena to Asclepius. So, as the pharmacon, whose sacrifice establishes the dual nature of the sacred and reinforces the separation of the monster and the god. However, it is for literature and the arts to reveal the close relationship of opposites and the innocence of the victim. In this respect, the myth of Medusa is revealing. In his study, The Mirror of Medusa, Tobin Sievers has identified the importance of two elements, the rivalry between Athena and the Gorgon, and the mirror motif. So, finally, Medusa, through Freudian interpretation, is associated with the castration of women. It is very evident in a passage that in Freud's interpretation, that women's castration is a result of violence imposed on her by the original hero. Women only appear in the story divided by separative decapitation, casting off of the feminine in the remote depths of the world, cast down or abject. The female remains unrecognized within the innermost recess, and it is this abject void which maintains the theater of the world and the logic of the talisman. In this theater, woman occupies the two opposite extremes of evil, castration, sorcery, and their cure, the phallus and the virgin. Freud argues that decapitation equals castration. The terror of Medusa is thus a terror of castration that is linked to the sight of something. Numerous analyses have made us familiar with the occasion for this. It occurs when a boy who has hitherto been unwilling to believe the threat of castration catches sight of the female genitals, probably those of an adult, surrounded by hair, and essentially those of his mother. The hair upon Medusa's head is frequently represented in works of art in the form of snakes, and these once again are derived from the castration complex. However frightening they may be in themselves, they are nevertheless serve actually as mitigation of the horror, for they replace the penis, the absence of which is the cause of the horror. Freud saw this as a confirmation of the technical rule according to which multiplication of penis symbols signifies castration. The sight of Medusa's head makes the spectator stiff with terror, turns him to stone. Observe that we have here once again the same origin from the castration complex and the same transformation of the effect. In the original situation, it offers consolation to the specter. He is still in possession of a penis, and the stiffening reassures him of that fact. So to conclude, if Medusa's head takes the place of a representation of female genitals, or rather if it isolates their horrifying effect from the pleasure-giving ones, it may be recalled that this displaying the genitals is familiar in other connections with apotropaic acts. What arouses horror in one will produce the same effect upon the enemy against whom one is seeking to defend oneself. So to conclude with that portion, the next part of the presentation is how the myth has taken hold in my art and in my life and serves as an alter ego. So this is one of the first completed paintings that I created in probably 1998. Self-portrait, pretty easily representational, serpents for hair. The idea here was that by using scissors that I could remove the monstrous element. So her eyes are closed. This could be happening in the mind's eye, or it could be an unwillingness to see what's going to happen, but it does refer back to the original myth and the gaze. The idea also being that if I cut this off, I cut off myself, and then this would be an act like of suicide, that you cannot separate yourself from your nature. Part of this myth insinuated itself into my life because of this tattoo. While this tattoo is not literally a Gorgon, it's not literally a Medusa symbol, this was an image of Lee by H.R. Giger. H.R. Giger, one of the most important concept artists of the 20th century. He is responsible for the concept art behind Aliens, Predator, and was one of the early designers in the creation of the movie Dune. What was interesting about this is it was an act of surrender. I gave my back to someone and said they could do anything they wanted. It was someone I trusted under unusual circumstances, and I was given this mark as a result of this connecting in my mind through symbolism and perhaps personification to Medusa, again, in that act of alter ego. I found incredibly interesting and peculiar parallels between my own history, my own life, and being a bearer of this apotropaic chthonic symbol. I was not always aware that Versace was, the brand itself. It has the Gorgon's head upon it, and it's one of Medusa's heads upon a shield. I went to school in Italy in my very early 20s, like when I was 21, and I went to a club once and my back was exposed, and the male Italians called after me, Versace, Versace, which left me completely confused, but they associated Medusa with the brand. So what I have shown here, this is the first oil painting I ever painted on the left. Totally embarrassing, not very technical, but the painting did get me into art school, so it wasn't, it served its purpose. Here, no hair at all, but I do have eyes. It's probably one of the only paintings where I have original eyes. And there's an interesting thing that happens after you've been painting 20 or so years, at which point I had painted these on the right. And I would say that in some way, in every one of these images, because of this conscious but sublimated understanding of the identity having some relationship to Medusa, each one possesses some small allusion to the myth. Now, whether it is requiring second eyes so as not to turn people to stone or for some way of protection, but the wings that you see, like on the Versace, very often Medusa has these wings on the side that's kind of peculiar and not totally literally explained anywhere. So the wings become an element. You can see those, it's a hat, but wings, 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 wings. Interpretation of self as monster. This is the Jabberwocky. This one, most of these paintings are under 9 by 12 inches, quite small, moving rapidly through ideas. This is self-portrait with tail. This is called Death in the Maiden, and by using the rough, it's an allusion towards decapitation, here again. And then also, rather than having deliberate snakes coming out of the head, here I've taken fragments from other primitive Northern Renaissance paintings, and they represent the internal turmoil or monstrous thoughts within the head. This is called the Slayer of the Snallygaster. So wearing a monster as a headdress, the slayer is going out to kill the monster. But if we learned anything from such contemporary heroes like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, if you are a slayer yourself, you usually have violence within you and you are part monster. This painting, which is all called Untitled, is about innocence and dreaming, the hawk representing dream. These are my eyes, not from another painting like most of them. My eyes on top of my own head, on top of, well, this would be an infant Christ body. But she's got this cherry branch and she's making a decision between these two frogs. And ultimately, I think she's actually chosen herself, even though it looks like she's making a decision between two things. Many allusions to Catholicism, the history of Western civilization, the art that we have in the Western world, is very Christian. So here, this is, instead of Madonna della Rosa, this is Madame della Rosa instead of the Madonna. And this is the woman who is made falling in love her God. So she is in love with the act of falling in love, as opposed to what the Madonna experienced, which was the ultimate loss and the passion for her son. And the secret here, which was at the very beginning of my career, age 15, I was already stealing the backgrounds off of paintings and putting myself on top of them. So I was unaware of what an act of appropriation was, but I was already working in that way. From 2006, this is Hierophantus with her cat. This is Yum Yum, but showing myself as the triple Gorgon, all three monsters in one. And there again, I've taken the background from a Holbein and used it as though I'm just sitting in his lap. So my process evolved during that next period of time. So this is 2007, working from a more literal collage and then transforming it into an ink underpainting in the process of the primitive Northern Renaissance. So I could achieve far more detail by using a detailed ink drawing on top of a true chalk gesso surface. And then how I translated this image into oil. So this is The Plague, an allegory about dating. And these are frogs. I interpret these sort of like the Frog Prince. You have to kiss a lot of frogs with this hope that they will turn into a prince. They'll turn into a partner, a real person. There are little allusions here. The rape of the Sabine women is on the pillar that holds the pot. She has a little ladybug on a leash, but the ladybug turns out to be male. What is this thing here on the perch? It's sort of like a bird, but with like giant teeth, sort of like a Venus flytrap or a vagina dentata. While the male libido is the sexuality, I decided it was libida, and libida eats bad frogs. So rather than having snaky locks for hair, I went more with just like a floral head thing and had fun with it. So the hairdo thing, like the Medusa-ness, sometimes showing like internal strife or angst. On the right, I went full out, pulling quotes from 300 years of art, some benign or good, some evil, all in conflict. So the piece on the right is called The Involuntary Thoughts of Lady Caroline Dubois. Here she is with her gaze upon this perfect rose, this aspiration of romance being something symmetrical and perfect and beautiful, as opposed to the reality that exists in her head of total conflict and self-destruction. The piece on the left is Lacrimos Melancholia, so in a little private ode. This period was a lot about like blues songs being tortured, sad, crying eyes. These are the crying eyes of our man of sorrow. The ecstasy of Madame Dolorosa, as I mentioned, taking these images of the Madonna and this allusion to Picasso's crying woman. And I was working with these eyes and I wanted to see how far I could disjoint them off the face and still make it appear as one image. So an ode to not just falling in love, but the woman who martyrs herself by falling in love endlessly, but incompletely. So this one, can I tie it to Medusa? I have eyes. There, you could tie it to death. This is a large allusion, a large attribution, a large homage to Montaigne, the Lamentation of Christ. I stole the body of Christ and put my head on it. So in this piece, this is this transformation of becoming an artist and not performing the biological destiny of being a woman. So the hysterical pregnancy is like when you're pregnant, but you're not. So the baby's gone, the eyes are gone, the breasts are taken off. So she's made a eunuch or more male, less female. And then the things flying around up above her, I assumed were like induced by anesthesia. And, at the time I was sort of like, I borrowed something too popular, too recognizable. This is sort of a total failure, but I don't know. The more I look back on this in time, I never would paint it again, but this is exactly how I felt at the time. So I I'm not disappointed with this painting anymore. I attempted to work with different types of appropriation, so usually failing completely, but borrowing the dress off a painting, also borrowing the demon off the nightmare. And this painting definitely has the wings of Medusa, the Gorgon's head, but identities within identities. This one's called Demon Mother. This is actually not about being a mother at all. This is about being in love with an addict, someone who is in and out of rehab, and trying to take care of them as they tore everything apart, but also trying to mirror what they needed in order to heal, and invoking that in myself so that they could be whole. So taking that big fat baby from Raphael and combining it with the demon from the nightmare, making a little art history hybrid demon that's super cute and ruining everything. So if you turn your head clockwise, this is Marie Antoinette by Elizabeth Fiji Labrun, and the eyes of Our Lady of Sorrow just got stuck there. Looked amazing. I painted it just like that. So some of the paintings are far more complex, some are more simple. Do I still think this is Medusa? I mean, in its most reductive form, there's still tragedy, loss, gaze. So not all of the collages that I started with were pretty or concrete. And this one, just to get this far, actually took years of trying to find pearls and take photos of people that would work. So I keep little archives of images, building taxonomies, waiting for a painting to be able to be rendered. So here's a little image of that ink. And the final image, this is Queen Bitch, working with the idea of, well, I thought it was pretty funny to have a queen that was phallocentric. So there are the snaky locks and the Medusa of the jellyfish or the octopus. These are intrinsic within their Latin names. And yes, I felt like she was a deeply chthonic, if not Lovecraftian cave dweller that came out of the depths and was looking for blood. So I guess the scissors show up again and again. The scissors are a tool that I use in order to work in fragments. So they were a destructive, constructive element. But I guess the scissors really stand in for Perseus's sword. They are able to cut things apart, separate, sever. We can go with Freud if you like, castrate if you will. This painting is titled Recessive Traits. In this piece specifically, I'm using my mother's eyes, and my eyes are below. In that deck is a dragon and Rasputin and Christ. So the multiple identities, the reflected inherited traits that come from one's mother. One of the things I attempted to put in this lecture, but just completely failed. I don't know if I have the wrong version of PowerPoint. I wanted to put Sylvia Plath's poem Medusa in, which is about her mother. In that poem, she is making allusions to mother as monstrous and cold. I think that, well, I've read critical analysis and there's no existing knowledge that her mother was this negative in her actual life. So I think you could interpret it a little more that like there are tensions between mother and daughter. There are inherited things that come through the female line that relate to extreme difficulty, sometimes frigidity, sometimes monstrousness, and that expression I think I could relate to some degree. So yes, very often you're asked, what's with the eyes? I think in the context of Medusa, it's something about the gaze, protecting oneself, also not wanting to turn anyone to stone. Also, the eyes are the windows to the soul. They take the exterior world and bring it in, as well as revealing the interior world and bringing it out. So it's a two-way affair. and utilized very often by surrealists, but it is really what is most communicative about each of us. It's how we see. So when I mention Our Man and Our Lady of Sorrow, this is a tradition from 15th century, 16th century. Again, the primitive Northern Renaissance in particular would do these portraits of Our Lady or Our Man of Sorrow, and they would be crying. And I felt a closeness, an affinity with these, that I could express something through them. I mean, to paint yourself crying is just sort of pathetic, but to align yourself with a greater human suffering that they seem to represent, seem to be speaking to things that were more universal and less personal, and put a level of removal between experience that could be small or petty or over dramatic, and aligning oneself with the world of myth and religion. In Cupid Complaining to Venus, this is a painting that I'm using eyes that I used over and over again obsessively in paintings. These are from a church in the border of Alsace. I love these spermazoic tears and how they imitate the honey. This is an allegory of a painting by Cranach of a nubile Venus and a an infant like Cupid. So he's holding a honeycomb and she's saying, hey, tisk, tisk, if you go after the honey, you're going to be stung. So this is an allegory for love. Unlike the original painting by Cranach, I am utilizing both sides of the myth into one. So I am both innocent, like the heart, it wants what it wants and it goes after things. And then I'm at once know better. I have a brain. And the bees in this one are marching up, and they don't seem to be stinging me yet, but they are trying to let me know that there's probably a smarter thing to be done here. So in this painting, this is called Saint Rage, and I think this is the transformation of the woman completely into the monster. Also, this gaping baboon mouth, that's something taken from like a Time Life book, but what an amazing mouth it was. And it seemed to express all of the rage that I had at this moment. I liked it because also rage was blind. So again, it's about the eyes, but the eyes then are gone. Rage is blind. What else can I say here? So the idea of the abject female goes back to the time of Aristotle. Aristotle actually thought that women were botched men, that something went wrong in the womb and they were created under circumstances where there was like a cold or frigidness, a lack of warmth, and their penis didn't form, and therefore we were monsters. So that's an idea going back thousands of years that seems to affect the interaction between the sexes and the monstrous abject female. So in this interpretation, rather than serpents, I took the crown of thorns of Christ and used those. So working again with the idea of the blind, lovers are blind, and this is like a Christian mix of passion. The root of passion is pathos, of great feeling or emotion. So therefore you can have the passion of lovers or the passion of Christ. Again, working with the theme of decapitation, this is the Red Queen. So each of these paintings have just a small illusion, but you tie them all together and there is a type of continuity. And while I was appropriating part of the image from Cranach, the sword in the hand specifically, Cranach, the Cranach family, Cranach brothers, elder and younger, they repeated this painting quite a bit. I also have an allusion here through the dress to Queen Elizabeth. So this is about decapitation, but as we saw earlier in the discussion about Freud, often decapitation is somehow aligned with castration, but in that way, this would be about female power. For me, I chose to put in a new element, taking it out of a Hieronymus Bosch painting. I brought in the skeleton that's reaching up into her ear and seems to be saying, again, like the bees, like, hey, what are you doing? This is not a good idea. I told you if you do this, there would be repercussions. And yet she seems pretty self-satisfied. And she is wearing a second eye that is not like covering all. She seems to have some kind of knowledge or higher order in which she needed to do what she did. So rather than this being just Judith and Holofernes or Salome and John the Baptist, I chose to go with the Red Queen, which is going towards Alice in Wonderland. All of those stories having male decapitation by female within them. Again, in this early work, it was a lot of experimentation. I'm not saying all of it worked or it was perfect, but here I attempted to have Our Lady of Kali. This is as though the angel Gabriel came down to the Virgin, but like got the house number wrong, ended up in India and delivered the Christ child to Kali. So here, this is from a primitive painting from another culture, and it has sort of like an allusion to sex. I love intertwining hands, and here, for me, it represents something supernatural. So the angel is really just these disembodied hands, and the light from this taper is very phallic in delivering the seed of the divine child to the Virgin. I mean, Kali might be a virgin. Interestingly enough, as disparate as Kali, this, again, a chthonic character that's much more like the Gorgon, it is said, or I have read, that through her worship, she's actually transformed over history and is less violent, and in some sects is much more resembling of the Virgin Mary. So I don't know if I was just farsing about or if I hit upon a reality that has something more true, because there is critical analysis and writing that poses these dangerous, monstrous females as being opposite or two sides of the coin of the virginal, innocent, pure. So somehow these align. Atropos descending. Atropos is one of the three fates. So one spins the thread and one measures the thread, and Atropos is the one that cuts the thread that measures the life. In that way, because she's associated with death, I get to bring my scissors back, and she has her wings. I also feel like this is an allusion to Medusa. And it's fun to bring back symbols, symbolism, and work with them over time. So, you know, you do something, you do it like, you know, I like the collage better than the painting. The painting wasn't as successful, so I wanted to try it again. Here I've used a papal tiara over the face, obscuring the eyes, but then the jewels where they would be in the papal tiara sort of represent many eyes. One of the last paintings I did with this theme, where I thought I transcended it, I was pretty sure that after this painting, I wasn't Medusa anymore. You do something for 20 years and maybe it's time to get a new alter ego. You got to grow into something else or new. So this was one of my sloppy collages. It's translation into ink. The idea here, here's the underpainting or dead painting limited palette, was that I was like St. Luke, and St. Luke was the apocryphal first author of the Madonna and Child. He was said to have painted this original painting for which all of these icons, East and West, represent the mother and child. And then, you know, the altered ego Medusa here represented by the shield of Caravaggio. But like the penitent Magdalene, a fallen woman who is rehabilitated and wishes to be, you know, a worshiper of the divine and the sacred. And like Saint Anthony, someone who is attempting to be virtuous and again tortured by demons. And, you know, again, what was Medusa? Medusa was an innocent, taken advantage of in the temple of Athena and transformed into a monster. And this to me was very postmodern, that like many of us, it's very hard to walk the middle path. So you're an innocent to be made or tempted and reduced, succumb to temptation, and then you're evil again, and then you attempt to rehabilitate yourself. So I smashed all of these titles from these different paintings together, and this is the temptation of the penitent Medusa, attempting to show the complexity of identity. So while she has snaky locks, she's trying to be good and paint the Madonna and Child, but yet these demons have arrived to pull at her hair and make her lose her cool and screw up her painting. And this is my cat, Yum Yum. So the last painting in this presentation is, I guess this happened after this. So one day, I don't know, it was about 2010, I was at a red light, and I don't know, sometimes things happen while you're washing dishes or you're at a red light or you're on the toilet. And in that moment, I no longer felt like this tattoo on my back was something that was me and there was like an inner monster or an inner turmoil. At once, I realized that the tattoo upon my back was an apotropaic symbol. You know, it's in the same place, it's just on my back, not my front, is Athena. And that she really, in some way, had been protecting me the entire time. I could say from the day when I got that tattoo, and probably not before, I'd had some incredible luck, especially in times of danger. And in that moment, I guess I felt more like Athena and less like Medusa. And there was a moment of transformation. So the next painting I painted after that, this is called Parthenogenesis of the Muse. And going with that very difficult Freudian phallocentric ideas, but going back to Queen Bitch, I attempted to show a portrait that is well, sometimes I like to challenge myself with the imagery I use. So I'm interested in the Crown of Christ from Van Eyck's painting that is also a papal tiara, and I stacked those up and made a phallus. So the idea here is like Athena, Athena gave birth to herself. She is an example of parthenogenesis, again, from the title of the painting. So this is a muse. In the history of painting, muses were used by artists. Artists needed a muse and then they would go make art, music or painting. And this one, the artist is the muse. So she has to entertain and titillate herself. So this is alluding to the act of masturbation as the creative act that you have to stimulate your own mind. You have to create within yourself your own fecundity and your own fertilization of your imagination, and that it is a self-perpetuated act, something solitary and alone. But the birds and the bees do it, and it's part of nature. And if women are to create, well, I mean, I suppose I could get a male muse, but there's no precedent for it that I'm aware of in history. So if the woman is muse and the woman is artist, then she must do it herself. And I like these little guys up here. I call these looky-loos. They're just totally shocked. Borrowed the Cupid from Botticelli's Primavera. And I don't know, it might be shooting me in the heart, it might be shooting me in the head. I brought back the libido. This painting is not really done. Brought back the ladybugs from another painting. So you get the opportunity with collage to like, well, I try to maintain some collages, but in the end, I actually destroy them, reuse them, and then these become characters in other paintings. So a little more of a theater for play and acting out and realizing impossible acts and, you know, those acts of transformation, hopefully achieving new understanding, new realization, and self-understanding that hopefully somebody else values are needed. If not, then, you know, these are merely gratuitous acts. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation on Medusa. Have a wonderful day.